Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a great viewer question that is to address the connection between a cluster B personality disorder, someone who is covert narcissistic, and sort of being disconnected from their own needs, their own wants, sort of their own drive moving forward. And I think that is a great viewer question because in my mind and understanding, there is a direct correlation between these. Now, a covert narcissist, particularly, not just that they have a pathological sense of self-importance, and they have a connection to really sort of an understanding that they can be a good relationship for somebody, but there's a lack of empathy. And coupled with this together and sort of this pathological sense of self-importance, they remain very conservative in their relationships. In other words, they're not very outgoing. They're not very sort of oftentimes perceived as gregarious. In other words, that they like to be around others. They remain very aloof, very quiet, and oftentimes are perceived then as condescending or having a condescending air. It's not my job, it's not my place, it's not my responsibility to reach out and to be proactive or connect with others, even if this is a family member, even if this is a spouse. It is to understand that, for example, a covert narcissist father who, because of this sort of indifference, sort of lack of being meeting people in the middle or having empathy, particularly that of their children, they become very passive, very aloof, very indifferent, sort of shrieking from responsibility or not reaching out when they can be a support. So in sharing sort of their perspective, or really what is built into that role of a father figure or a parent, which is to be nurturing, which is to be supportive, which is to be guiding and help people to grow successfully through the life stages of becoming autonomous, of having value of self, knowing where your self-esteem is, knowing where your boundaries are, knowing how to enforce them, knowing how to work through particularly difficult emotions, such as being bullied, such as needing a shoulder to cry on or to have a sounding board to communicate with. So these very basic fundamentals are not experienced in a relationship with a covert narcissist because of their sort of ignoring tendencies, if you will, or their very passive tendencies, their inability or lack of desire or feeling responsibility and accountability to rise to the occasion of their role in the family. They just sort of exit out the side door, exit stage left, out the back door, out the bottom and into the garage. They're just not to be found. They're not very able to be then also subject to confrontation or reaching out. And so because of this, people then, especially young children, begin to arrive at the conclusion, because of this, I must not be worth talking to. There is something about me that must be inherently flawed. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, I must not be good enough. This is the conclusion oftentimes that others arrive at, not necessarily deliberately or consciously, but subconsciously, feeling because they are not proactively connected with by the covert narcissist, they tend to then arrive at the feeling inside, it must be my fault. There must be something inherently wrong or flawed with me. So there becomes this cycle or pattern then of ruminating and then either going in the direction of people pleasing in order to help their self or their organism, their psyche, to get those needs attended to, the need for communication, the need for understanding, the need for belonging, the need for communication, for nurturing, for touch, love, guidance, having someone who is, there to help guide them, particularly if this is a parent figure. Oftentimes that child, because of the conclusion that they're arriving at about themselves, they then go to extremes or above and beyond. They become hyper responsible. Or the other extreme, irresponsible. So hyper responsible, what does that look like? People pleasing, doing things for the covert narcissist to get them to be happy, to give them all sorts of compliments, to always have the conversation be about them. Children or spouses learn very quickly that if they're not receiving attention from this person, then they better find ways either to make sure that they're happy or to make sure that this person knows that, they then begin the catering process. They might begin catering to their needs in order to fall in line with their unspoken assumptions, that, I am better than, and so you must leave me alone then. I am better than, so you must make me the meal. I am better than, you must plan the trip. I am better than, so, you might as well give it up. In other words, people then begin a pattern of low self-esteem, a lack of positive self-talk, a lack of positive, productive, and functional relationships, or they become hyper responsible, meaning taking care of this individual's needs, becoming the straight A student, becoming the perfect employee, becoming the perfect spouse, having the perfect house, keeping everything in pristine shape. In other words, because of this pattern or because of this feeling ignored, that they then, then secure the relationship, they then have to overexert, become over-responsible. We see this also in families where there's alcoholism, where, if the parents are checked out, in the garage drunk, in the basement passed out, drinking shots, or slurring their speech or acting irresponsible or inappropriate at family or work events, this person becomes an embarrassment. You might or might not seek therapy to address this, Alcoholics Anonymous. People then oftentimes in that situation also feel that, well, I must not be good enough, that's why they're drinking. I must not be funny enough, that's why they're never talking to me. I must not be lovable, so that's why they're seeking solace in the bottle. So people begin to arrive at all these different conclusions and then either become over-responsible, the straight A student, the perfect wife, the perfect husband. So they become beyond reproach, and then furthermore become over-obligating to this person, doing everything for them. In other words, they're falling right in line. That covert narcissist indeed then does have everybody making their meals, cooking their house, planning their vacations, raising the children, becoming the perfect, impeccable, etc. So perfectionism can develop out of that. But then furthermore, there is then the ones who become very irresponsible and become inattentive or unaware of their own needs. This can also become an issue with the over-responsible, the one who is trying to become too perfect, beyond reproach. They're not aware of their needs as well, meaning I need to relax, I need a vacation, I need someone to give me a hug, a kiss, affection, make the meals once in a while, plan the vacations, help out with the yard work, help with the home repair. In other words, too much gets burdened onto the others. Others end up picking up the slack within a covert narcissist relationship. But particularly that of the ignoring. Children and spouses, they don't want to become too needy. They don't, so they then become unaware of or dissociative or basically repressive or suppressive of their own needs. They push them down out of awareness. People might not then know what their sleep patterns need to be, what their food and eating and consumption patterns need to be, either with food, conversation, relationships, employment, the need for creative outlets, the need for variety, the need to self-actualize. Those needs then become numbed out. Unfeeling. It doesn't matter to me if you never talk to me. I'll just go along and I'll live my life. It doesn't matter if you never plan a vacation, we just won't go anywhere. It doesn't matter if you don't want to cook, I will just starve. And then, somebody, goes on, this tirade or this, taking up like almost like they're on strike, a hunger strike, a work strike, a talk strike. They begin to then really push the limits, and then their life becomes in a state of disarray, but then they're gathering up this negative energy. It's all because of you. Then the blaming begins, the externalizing begins. A person then becomes dissociated, disconnected, unaware, and feeling irresponsible for their own needs. They don't know what they need anymore. I don't know that I need to be informed, to travel, to have relationships, to eat, to sleep, to have a balanced budget, to have my own income, to have my own money, to have my own personal space, or just to be on a state of happiness or content. In other words, discontent, anxiety, and blame becomes the fuel with which, and then anger can also become, and the hostility and rage can then become a negative energy. Self-reproach, self-sabotage. People then become addicted to these negative states. Particularly that in people who, they give up. They feel that they are, that they have this sort of blame, and my life will never get better. They arrive at these conclusions. I don't deserve. I'm not lovable. I am not enough. So you've got, both polar opposites being in a situation or as a result of being in a relationship with a covert narcissist. People feel invisible. And then furthermore, people who are in that situation, then they then become desirable of the invisibility. In other words, I don't need anybody. I don't need anything. They become that polar opposite. They disconnect from their needs. They don't acknowledge and validate their needs. They aren't even aware that they're hungry. They're not aware that they're thirsty. They're not aware that they're bored. They're not aware that they need support. They're not, I don't need anybody. I'm going to go through it alone. You'll hear all these, people bantering, this sort of, the rebellious individuality. I'll do it all myself, whether it's sewing their own clothes, growing their own food, etc. And just acting the opposite. I don't need anything. I don't need you, etc. And then, things then come around, and then person says, whoa, well, I need to get employed. I need affection. I need a dining mate. I need to go places. And then likewise, on the flip side, the hyper-responsible will also, go to these extremes. I have to always be around to take care of this person. I can't leave the house. I can't move because I need to be close to the family. They become hyper-responsible. It must all be my fault. So they work on trying to change themselves to adapt and adjust to meet the needs of this covert narcissist, to become more interesting. They might, then overextend themselves, over-obligate. Again, becoming unaware of or numbing of their own needs. Excessive drinking, drugging, starvation for long periods of time. They become, they're not eating. And so people then are in those endorphins. They're running on vapors. They haven't eaten in days. They haven't showered in days. They haven't worked in years. They're afraid to leave the home. They might develop post-traumatic stress syndrome, and they're numbed out to their needs. It becomes very difficult then for people who have gone through this for a series of years or decades, and they go, OMG, I'm at this time of my life and I have no friends, I have no family, I have no food, I have no finances. What just happened? And they don't know where to start. So there's a definite connection between becoming unaware of or insensitive to your own needs and the feeling, not good enough because you're a human being. You have needs as an individual. You cannot just isolate. You cannot just sabotage. You must understand the connection and the correlation between being ignored and being treated as if you're unimportant or if you're just a little nobody, and realizing you are not the projection of the covert narcissist. That becomes flawed thinking. And people then experience inappropriate levels of self-esteem, very low self-esteem, which oftentimes is not founded on truth. It is not your truth, but people have made it their reality because they have been so glossed over. They have been so ignored. They've become used to feeling so invisible. They frown and they can't turn it upside down. They are just, so unhappy. And they think that that's how their life is always going to be. And then the flip side, once again, the person who has become the over-responsible, the perfect A student, the perfectionist, also then seeks through this over-responsibility then to control the outcome. So these people then suffer when too much is not enough. They can't, become any more perfect. And they find that in their perfection, they have not found the happiness or the control that they think that they have by becoming perfect, by becoming that beyond reproach person. They become dissociated with their own needs, of their need for balance and their need to be able to allow others in or to delegate, to trust others for them to plan the trip. You didn't, and then they've got the ricochet balance. No one else is good enough. No one else is as perfect as them. And then they become hypercritical, or they might rage and get upset when things aren't perfect, or when they can't be the one in control. They can't be that hyper responsible individual when they have to share responsibility, share family responsibilities. When as families get older and then maybe they're moving, and then we're talking about heirlooms and things, they become upset when others, are deserving as well, and they can't just have the full kitty for themselves. They're not very good at sharing, or it's all then about them. So they have this persona then of being narcissistic or insensitive and callous to others. They're just too perfect. So you can see both flip sides where people then disconnect from their own needs and their own self-actualization, where things can become, out of control, and it can become a very big deal. Sadness, being very depressed, being very sort of focused on accumulation of things. We're having their self-worth based on the things that they own versus inside, and then as they find that they accumulate, that it's not filling their inner needs. So this, their needs for eye contact, their needs for affection, their needs for human warmth, understanding, to be, to be equal to people, and to not have to control things all the time. Being very attached to the outcome. Things don't go a specific way. they're very, unhappy, and they can't quite make the connection. Why am I so happy when I've got unhappy when I've got the perfect job? Why am I so unhappy when I've got the perfect house, the perfect family? Da 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 da. And it just they find that inner fire can't be burning strong. So there's definitely a connection between a covert narcissist ignoring of needs as well as what you are experiencing as a connection within yourself. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you today, and I hope that these videos do help. Please share and please subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Peace out. Have a beautiful day.